Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're stepping into the shadows of the digital world, and we're going to try to understand the immense, almost overwhelming challenge of investigating cybercrime. You've probably heard this quote before: every contact leaves a trace. It's the absolute bedrock of all crime scene investigation, a principle laid down by the pioneer of forensics, Edmond Locard. The idea is simple. A footprint in the mud, a stray fiber on a jacket, something is always left behind.
But here's the thing. What happens when those traces are purely digital? What if your crime scene is a global network and the only fingerprints are just strings of code? That right there is the core problem for today's digital detectives. The fundamental rules might be the same, but the game has completely changed. Okay, let's dive in.
So, let's start with the crime itself. And we're not talking about petty theft here. These are incredibly sophisticated attacks that can bring entire nations, even huge global corporations, to a grinding halt.
And the real-world impact is just massive. Look at Argentina. A ransomware attack completely paralyzes the country's immigration systems. Or think about a major tech giant having its most sensitive secrets stolen and then basically weaponized against them. These aren't just technical glitches, They are sophisticated crimes with severe real-world consequences, and they really set the stage for how high the stakes are in these investigations.
So, how in the world are we supposed to stop this? Well, you might actually be surprised to hear that the best defense strategy out there is a lot like how we fight a public health crisis. See, experts use this 5-part cybersecurity framework to build what they call a defense in depth. It's not a one-and-done thing. It's a constant cycle. First, you identify what you need to protect. Then you protect it. You're constantly trying to detect threats. You have to have a plan to respond when an attack happens. And you have to know how you're going to recover afterwards. It's not about finding one magic bullet, but building multiple layers of security, kind of like a medieval fortress. And what's really fascinating here is how we can map all of these technical defenses onto a concept that, well, we all unfortunately understand pretty well by now. Let's break this analogy down a bit. First up, you need public awareness. In the real world, that's washing your hands, wearing a mask. In the digital world, it's all about training your people to spot those sneaky phishing emails and suspicious links. Your employees, they're your absolute first line of defense. Then, of course, comes the vaccine. This is all about strengthening your systems before an attack even happens. You're patching software, you're scanning for weaknesses, you're basically making your network less vulnerable to known threats, which shrinks what we call the attack surface. That's all the possible ways an attacker could try to get in. Next, you need constant screening, right? Just like we have health screenings, your network needs things like antivirus software and firewalls, tools that are always 24/7 monitoring for any sign of malicious activity. And finally, if an infection does get through, you have to quarantine. You isolate the infected computer or that part of the network to stop the virus from spreading everywhere. But, and this is the big but, what happens when all of this still isn't enough?
Well, when those defenses fail, you're suddenly standing in the middle of a digital crime scene. And that's exactly where the investigation begins, this hunt for digital clues, trying to find the ghost in the machine. So investigators go right back to Locard's principle. They're looking for the malicious code the attackers left behind, and they're trying to trace the sensitive data the attackers walked away with. The principle still holds, but wow, the practice is just infinitely harder.
And here is exactly why it's so much harder. Unlike a physical crime scene, the digital world is just chaotic. The evidence can be scattered across servers in totally different countries. It can be changed or deleted with just a few keystrokes. And some of the most valuable data, the stuff in a computer's active memory, is volatile. The second you turn that computer off, poof, it vanishes like smoke. And that leads us to, honestly, the toughest part of this whole story. Because finding the evidence is one thing, but using it to actually prove someone is guilty in a court of law, that is a completely different ballgame. See, our entire legal system is built on this one really important sacred principle. You are innocent until proven guilty. You don't have to prove you didn't do it. The burden of proof is 100% on the prosecution to prove that you did. So here's the million-dollar question. What happens when a really skilled attacker erases their tracks perfectly? This quote gets right to the heart of it. A good defense attorney can argue, hey, just because you didn't find the smoking gun, that doesn't prove it was never there. Maybe your tools just weren't good enough to find it. And that is how you create reasonable doubt in the digital age. Think about it like this. If your security software scans your system and doesn't find an intruder, can you say with absolute 100% certainty that your system is clean? Or if a doctor's scan comes back clear, does that guarantee there's no cancer? The answer, unfortunately, is no. And in a courtroom, that no is where a case can completely fall apart. So, with this incredible dilemma hanging over their heads, digital investigators have to operate with extreme discipline, with a really rigorous mindset. This is basically their code.
It all comes down to this really simple but incredibly powerful mantra. Assume nothing, believe nothing, challenge and check everything. They do this to avoid bias, to not jump to conclusions, and to build a case based only on verifiable facts. Every log file, every piece of data, it all gets questioned and double-checked.
And this brings us to a really fundamental split in the world of digital investigations. On one hand, you've got public law enforcement. Their main goal is justice, right? And they have legal authority, they can get warrants and subpoenas. But on the other hand, you have private investigators who are hired by corporations. Their goal is to protect the company's assets and its bottom line. They have totally different goals, different rules, and often very different loyalties.
This all leads to this huge, often agonizing decision for any company that gets hacked. Do we call the police? And the answer is almost never simple. It's this delicate balancing act between their legal obligations, the financial hit they've just taken, and the potential damage to their public image. And sometimes they decide it's just better to handle it quietly.
And all of this leaves us with one final, really tough question that sits right at the heart of our modern digital society. When the evidence can be erased in a second, and the criminals are borderless ghosts in the machine, how can we ever be certain that justice is served? Thank you for watching.